is it so inconsistent?
Construction's hard.
Hey everybody, welcome back. This is another episode of the Construction is Hard podcast, brought to you by Rivet, the workforce management platform for mechanical, electrical, plumbing contractors today. Today, I'm Brian Witt, by the way, if you aren't tired of my voice yet. To my left is the old fart Gary Fox. And with that being said, we'll dive right into our next nugget of coal. So for those of you that have been watching season 2 here, our theme this season is little nuggets of coal. These are not the golden nuggets that you might find. They're not the topics. They're not the things that you're going to hear on the keynote stages of the conferences you go to. They're not going to be the things that, the latest entrepreneur or business person or celebrity or famous athlete comes and talks about for self-improvement, etc. These are the things that are actually happening in the construction companies that Gary and I get to speak with, or in Gary's company, or in the ones that we work with today or over the years. And these are the little lumps of coal that we believe you can throw into the furnace to help drive your train forward and move your business along. And so today, we're talking about a guy named Sisyphus. Okay, so Sisyphus, Sisyphus, Sisyphus. And I'm going to tie this home, mark my words, so bear with me. All right, so for those of you, more refined and educated people of the world like myself, as opposed to Gary, you might have heard of Sisyphus in the past, and he was the king of Corinth, supposedly in ancient Greek mythology, and Sisyphus was an asshole. He would kill people when they were his guests, so he broke the sacred hospitality oath. He supposedly cheated death twice, and his punishment by the gods was he was damned for eternity to roll a giant boulder uphill, and this task never ended, and the boulder, this massive boulder, was constantly a load that it was his to bear. And so this idea of pushing the boulder up the hill, that's our episode or our theme today, but we want to tie it back to construction and specifically
he might have been the first superintendent ever. Could have been.
He might very well have been the first general labor superintendent. Today, by the way, fun fact for those
Thanks
of you
for
out there.
educating me.
I'm trying. So, if you were curious, Gary, Sisyphean task is an adjective used to describe an endless or unyielding labor or task. So, let's talk about workforce management now. The projects never stop coming, right? We never stop doing work, getting work. And so thus, that labor coordinator, the general superintendent, the director of field forces, that VP of operations maybe even, that person's arduous task of needing to forecast, labor plan, align or schedule or coordinate and communicate and get our people on the jobs that can get the work done properly. If you think about it, that is a load, that is a boulder that we never stop pushing uphill. And I think the intent of today is Sisyphus is in your construction company if you're a self-performing contractor somewhere. And when you think about it, really think about it, who is ultimately responsible or bears the burden of aligning, planning, maneuvering, communicating, getting the right people to the right jobs at the right time? That can be seriously a very arduous task. And
it's the hot seat. There's no doubt about that. That person who's in charge of that responsibility is sitting in the hot seat.
And Gary sat there himself, and so we'll talk about that here in a second. Actually, one of the hot seat is a funny term that I want to expound upon. We had a friend down in St. Louis, large electrical contractor. The hot seat is actually a term that I want to expound upon a little bit. The hot seat was originally coined by a friend of ours down in St. Louis running an electrical shop, 500 to 1,000 electricians, so serious operation. And he always spoke of the hot seat being this, not even a rite of passage really, it was just this burden that they passed around to different people when they got to a certain point in their careers. It's, hey, it's your turn to be in the field coordinator spot, in the director of field forces spot. And that seat, they basically kept a counter in their minds as a leadership team of the people that held that job and how long were they going to leave them in there? How long do they think they could handle it? How long can you ride the lightning, right? And it was a good way of identifying, when they first adopted a workforce management platform, they were one of the first large contractors to do it. And that was one of their main reasons for actually adopting it, was we recognize this seat, this role, this burden, it burns out some of our most important people and our most experienced people, and they lost them over time. And so they said this is a way that we might potentially be able to mitigate or lighten that load. And so I'd like to kind of, Gary, you sat in that seat for a long time.
Yeah.
And I'd love to go into that.
It's a strong argument to be made for developing a team to support the whole process and not have the burden fall on one individual, right? You become the company fireman in a way, too. You have a fire roaring over here, who do you send? You send that superintendent, he's the best guy to fix it. You got a fire rolling over here, you do the same thing, you send him over there, and he hops around from fire to fire. We've talked about this in previous episodes about paving a way through the woods with a good workforce management platform versus the troops out wandering around aimlessly in the other scenario, and the superintendent jumping around from job to job or corps to corps trying to help with situations. And so a little fire prevention helps, right? If the fires aren't roaring up everywhere you look, because you're doing a better job managing overall, that alleviates the burden on that individual quite a bit. And the only way I think you can really do that is with a team approach. So a team approach to save one of your best employees from burning out is pretty valuable investment, and something that I think you really need, you owe it to yourself to look into and see if there's something you can do to alleviate him from that.
And we talk.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just saying, we talk about mitigating the risk too. We've talked about that in previous episodes. Of the succession planning there is hard. Getting a standard and a process, etc. But this is actually a different take, or a rare occurrence, you may say, for Gary and I to be more. This is more of kind of the empathetic or the emotional even approach of this person is also, it's for their sake. Construction is hard,
and then a lot of it is self-imposed, where I'm the guy, I'm sitting in this seat, I'm able to do this, and I'm gonna do it, so sometimes it's hard to recognize what this individual is really going through, and that individual may not even know it himself, or herself. Thank you. You get very good at managing the stress, and even to the point where you don't even know that it's there, and it becomes kind of just part of what you do. And I can speak for that from experience, because I never realized how much the stress I was under until I retired. And when that was gone, it was a remarkable thing that happened. And, you sit back and go, wow, was that really happening to me? And you start to realize that you were under a lot of stress. And I don't think that, in construction, today's world, you're ever going to totally eliminate it. But you can certainly try to control it, and
I think you owe it. We owe it to our team members, that those director of field, the general superintendent, even the ops executive, quite frankly, is also where a lot of this ends up landing. But we owe it, I think, to our people, where if there's a way to mitigate some of it, if there's a way to make it not as hard, that's a lot of our obligation as business leaders. My own teams, if there is a tool that can alleviate some of the stress or load that they're under, it's my obligation to find a way, or to at least seriously evaluate if it is a viable and valuable solution, and that has a value to it as far as just alleviating. But you have a great analogy of boiling the frog.
Oh, like boiling the frog, yeah. So a frog, if you have a boiling pot of water and you throw a frog into that boiling pot of water, he's going to feel that pain instantly, and he's going to die, right? If you set a frog in a pot of water and you start turning up the heat slowly, that frog will adapt to that temperature, and you'll eventually get it to a boiling point, and you'll eventually kill the frog, but he'll never experience any pain, and he won't even know what happened to him. So don't boil the frog.
Don't boil the frog. Your labor leaders are the frog. Don't boil the frog.
Right.
But that's another piece too of, there's groups I've worked with. In fact, one down here in Florida. We're filming down here in Florida, actually, oddly enough, so plenty of frogs and plenty of hot water. But there's a group down here in Florida that I knew, and the business leader had run the business for the last 20 years, and his son was getting ready to take over. And he actually ended up purchasing a workforce management tool, and I was all concerned about, well, are you really considering the value and the change impact and your processes, and we're going to be able to do this? And he was totally open to it, but not really even that much about it. He was like, yeah, that sounds great, Brian, but really, I get it. I get what it does. Sounds good. I'm good. And I go, I'm all worried, are you going to really value this tool? And I'm thinking about his adoption. I want you to take this seriously. And finally I go, Mark, are you really in this? And he goes, yeah, I have to be. He goes, this is what keeps me up at night. He goes, my son is about to take over the business, and every other piece of this business, the accounting side, the estimating side, the business development. He goes, I've got people, I have tools, I have processes for all that. He goes, this labor side of the business, I cannot teach my son that in a year, in 2 years, in 5 years. It took me 15 to 20 years to finally figure it out. How is he supposed to jump into the driver's seat, jump into the boiling pot of water, and figure this out? And so that whole idea of the hot seat and putting his own son into it, he decided it was worth making the investment to give him a chance. And I think there's something of that today too in a lot of companies. When you see that succession planning piece of who's going to be the next one in the hot seat, you owe it to the next guy or gal to
you owe them help.
Chance.
You owe them. You try to get them some help. There's only so much help you can offer to. That's to be said. I mean, if that boulder's small and he's pushing it and doesn't need any help, he or she, if he doesn't need any help, then fine. But when those burdens get really heavy, you need to figure out a way to organize a team and help them better your processes. It's like there's a theory about how the pyramids were constructed back in ancient Egypt, where...
Will you educate me?
Yes. Well, yeah, if I can. I don't know if that's possible or not, but I'll give it a shot. They're all slave labor, right? Building ramps and pushing these massive stones up these ramps and setting them in place using, thousands of people to do it, right? Well, every once in a while, that the burden would get too heavy, somebody would slip, and all of a sudden you'd have a catastrophic event where the stone would fall all the way to the bottom of the ramp, crushing thousands of people, and they just became part of the ramp, right? Because they had plenty of people to push it back up there. But that's an example of don't let that happen, right?
Yeah.
Don't let that happen.
I think as we begin to close, Sisyphus has this burden, and he's constantly rolling this boulder up the hill. But we have those people usually in our construction companies, in our labor operations places, and ask yourself who today is pushing that boulder up the hill. Is it one person? And then consider first and foremost what we always preach. Workforce management is a business practice, and that's a team approach, and there's the opportunity to create a team approach at it. So hey, can we get some more people behind that boulder maybe to help manage the load? And then think of it as there are tools out there to support that process. Hey, let's get those people that are pushing that boulder, let's get them some equipment, let's get them a bulldozer, and now all of a sudden we can kind of change the game here. So with that, again, this was one of our just little nuggets of coal. We hope it's valuable. We get these are not going to be life-changing things, but we do hope that it was valuable, and we appreciate everybody listening again. Feel free to reach out to Gary and I. Let us know your thoughts. That it really does mean the world. It helps us understand if any of this is landing with anybody. We appreciate the feedback. That being said, again, thank you. Gary and I appreciate it. This is Construction is Hard.
But it doesn't have to be.
We are here to talk about workforce management. Why is it so inconsistent?
Construction is hard.